think it's my tassels that are
Right, she wants to eat everything.
Stop.
All right, welcome back to Black Bear News, where everything is connected. We have an in-studio guest today, Iyapo, Moyende, and Ngina. And what's up, y'all? Early chatters are in. Hopefully you can hear me. 2 people, 1 mic. What's up, Iyapo? How you doing?
I'm good.
Okay.
I'm great, actually.
Right on, right on. So cool. Yeah, we're just going to, I don't know, just kind of talk about this and that. Hold on 1 second. Let me look at some of these chats. What's up, people? What's up, Gwen, Poppy, Rich, Scott, Troy? How are you? Yes, I know. Weird, huh? A guest on the show. It's not just my mug, you know, beaming at you every single day. So what's up, guys? So we're just kind of freestyle some conversation. Kuro, what's up? How you doing? We're going to talk about the state of climate change and other things. I don't know, as it relates to the world, politics, life, people, brains, emotions. I don't know. The grinding in the background of my video. You have 3G coverage where you're at? Well, then you're good, I guess. I am Sweet Leaf. What's up? What's up? What's up? So yeah, let's talk about some. So I wanted to start off. We were talking just before the video about a graph that I saw, or a poll, not a graph. Well, it was a graph of a poll in a graph form, showing concern for climate change among different racial groups in the United States. So if you guys remember that, I showed that the other day, and I can't find it, but I can tell you what it was. Like, so white people were 49% concerned about climate change. It was like black people were 56 or 59% concerned about climate change. Latino 70%, which is a very interesting, I don't know, just a very interesting poll to me. I was surprised by that. I told you about this poll.
Yes, yeah, we talked about it before the show. And I was actually pleasantly surprised by it as well, especially, I guess, considering that, at least for the period of time that I've been doing political work, there is a narrative that almost implies or insinuates that people of color in general are less interested in issues around the environment and climate change. So it was like refreshing.
Yeah, no, I thought that. I mean, that's why I was surprised by it as well. I mean, I know that the narrative that climate change is like a white issue is. I know that that's wrong. But I, kind of just assumed that it was, in general, like climate change circles or climate change groups or people who are concerned about climate change generally tend to be mostly white people. So I mean, I just assumed from my own observations in my own life, like, yeah, so I was pleasantly surprised as well, and that also had to kind of coincide with this article, or not. It's not an article; it's an interview. Where did it go? This is it. This is an interview. I'm not going to play it. I'm not going to play it. It's like a podcast interview, but maybe I'll link it below this video. But it is an interview with a woman, Ayana Elizabeth Johnson, who is a marine biologist who's obviously concerned about climate change. And what she's saying is, if black people didn't have to worry about racism or deal with the effects of racism or systemic racism or being, constantly having to deal with this issue in their lives, that if this issue didn't exist to the extent that it does, then imagine the progress we could make on climate change. So if we were a unified force, all races were a unified force without the being subjugated to the inequities of being in a different caste, almost like in
Yes.
this society, then we can make a lot of progress on climate change. So it's an interesting interview. It's a really good interview. I'm going to link it below. But I don't know, Iyapo, what are your thoughts about that?
I haven't seen the interview, but I'm really interested because it's kind of been this kind of giant dragon in the room. You see little you'll see little news headlines every once in a while, or clippings every once in a while about some amazing, potentially world-changing technology created by the most impoverished or the most, quote, oppressed peoples around the world that can have, a massive impact on the environment and on climate change. And it shows, these are like real world demonstrations of what she's talking about, that even being pitted against circumstances of hunger or social and economic inequity, people are creating these amazing technologies. I'm reminded of this quote that says, necessity is the mother of invention. And so you'll see, like I saw something a few years ago about this indigenous child. This kid was like 14 years old. He lived on a res that didn't have running water, and his house didn't have electricity. And so just based on a project that he was doing for school or whatever,
Right.
came up with a way he created some like little generator out of solar power and junk, like
Right.
a solar power generator created out of junk from a landfill
Right.
to power his house.
Yep.
A 14-year-old.
Yep.
Right? Or there
Yeah.
was just constant instances of primarily young people, for that matter, creating these technologies that just have so much potential if taken on a mass scale.
Right. Right. And
So,
and
yeah.
and obviously these technologies are, I don't know if they're being viewed as a as a solution, or if they're being taken seriously because of the people who are creating them. But I mean, yeah, it makes me think of just through the last 100 years, like all the amazing inventions that Black people have been responsible for, right? That most people don't realize.
Yeah.
But imagine if.
We were free to just create.
Right. Exactly.
Right. And there was another one. There was a woman, a Nigerian woman in Nigeria, who was a young woman, 21, 22 years old, no college, sees this problem, right? The problem is landfills, inadequate, like, disposal of trash
Right.
in her community. And she's like, okay, well, I need to make some money, but there's this issue that's really important to me. And so she starts getting some of her friends to harvest the plastic out of these landfills.
Right.
So every night they would go and they would harvest this plastic. And she created high-grade industrial fencing out of recycled plastic, and ended up making her first $1 million off the idea in a year.
Right.
Right? So the multi-layers of how these inventions are happening too.
Right.
I read another story about a woman in Congo who was working in she was harvesting plantains
Right.
every year. And she was talking about the enormous amount of waste that is produced from harvesting plantains. Who
Right.
knew? The leaves.
Right.
Right? They would just strip the leaves, and then they would end up in a landfill, and
Right.
they would attract flies, and they had all these problems.
Right.
And she built a business where she now has solved multiple problems.
Right.
The environmental impact problem of this waste that is produced by this industry. She started employing women who previously couldn't get work anywhere by
Right.
creating paper out of plantain leaves. And she is talking
Right.
about how people all over the world
Right.
are buying this paper
Right.
to support this program that is now solving multiple issues
Right. Sure.
for people.
Right.
One last one I want to highlight because this was genius. There was a man in Tibet. I can't remember his name. But he was the one, and now everybody is using briquettes. Like they have 1,000 YouTube videos on how to make briquettes.
Right.
Right. So for your watchers who may not be aware of what a briquette is, it's like taking recycled products, paper, trash, wood, leaves, whatever, and creating long burning, smokeless burning alternatives to wood.
Right.
Right. So it's really popular now for campers and
Sure.
doomsday
Right.
preppers
Right.
and stuff like that. But the technology was created by this Tibetan engineer
Right.
who his primary focus was using his engineering degree to address three main problems in Tibet,
Right.
which was pollution in the main riverways and water sources in Tibet, was
Right.
deforestation, and part of the deforestation was the leading cause of death, of non-accidental death in Tibet at that time, was death due to respiratory distress.
Okay.
Because the poorest people in the country were chopping down the wood, hence the deforestation, because they
Right.
couldn't afford fuel to cook with, but they would be cooking with wood inside their homes, hence the high death rate by respiratory distress. So what he did was he collected many women from these rural areas, the poorest areas, and put them up in housing and taught them how to make the briquettes. So he would take them out by the riverbanks
Right.
and they would clean the rivers.
Okay.
They would clean trash. They would collect trash, right?
Right.
And the trash that they would collect, they would take back to the encampment, and they would transform the trash into a soup, right? A goulash.
Right.
And then he would teach them how to make the trash into briquettes.
Okay.
And then he would send each woman back home with pots and technology to not only have briquettes for their house, but now to continue teaching other people
Right.
how to make this smokeless wood alternative,
Right.
addressing those three main issues that were important to him.
Right.
So I raise all of that because it's just indicative of like freeing up the genius that lays dormant in a lot of ways in oppressed communities. And you mentioned the caste, like the lower caste people, like
Right.
unleashing the genius
Right.
that
Right.
resides
And
there.
and Ayana brings that up in that podcast that she has. She's like, imagine the technologies, or imagine the creations, imagine the things that could have been created already if people hadn't been dissuaded or discouraged from like I've been watching a Malcolm X program on Netflix. It's like Who Killed Malcolm X, right? But when he was little, he wanted to be a lawyer, and his
Right.
teacher was like, "No, that's not. You're
Yeah,
not
that's
going to do.
why don't
You're
you
not
be a
going to do that."
carpenter?
Right.
Jesus was a carpenter.
Right. Right.
Yeah.
I mean, he ended up being, obviously way more influential, becoming the person that he was. But he could have been an incredible lawyer for black rights, for civil rights, etc. Right.
Yeah.
So, yeah, we were talking about a bunch of stuff beforehand. I guess maybe let's jump to. Well, we were talking about political action and trying to solve things through the political system. And I guess maybe if we try to tie that in with climate change, obviously neither of us has a lot of faith in utilizing the political system. And I don't think anybody on this channel actually does. Like, I'm going to assume that most people on this channel don't believe that we are going to vote ourselves into a solution for climate change or a necessary action for climate change. So what kind of, what kind of, we have somebody who wants to get in the show. What kind of actions do you think would be adequate, necessary, actually functional ways to create change given the system that we live in?
Okay, so you and I have talked about this before, and I don't know if I should be careful with what I say in reference to this, but I think that the thing that's most important for us to remember is that this system needs to project a certain amount of power that even those of us who don't believe in the system kind of concede to, right? That we kind of believe in this power or this overwhelming force, and how do we compete, or whatever, how do we stage a contest with this big giant overwhelming system? And that's what the system needs to project. That's why the media campaigns are so prolific. That's why the propaganda coming from mainstream media is so deep and entrenched, right? And it gives us, whether we acknowledge it or not, this feeling of powerlessness, which is what it needs,
Right.
right? And you know, aside from the fact that my area of expertise is really the medical side of things. I've been an activist for 20 plus years, and I have come to some conclusions about how each one of us can utilize our own power. And that's really not a discussion people are as apt to engage in. Because see, it's easy for us to look over there and say, those are the bad guys. Like, that's the problem. Like, the system is the problem, or the government is the problem. It's an easy thing for us to do,
Right.
right? When there's this, ever looming bad guy that we can blame all things on.
Right.
But one of the things that this society has done very geniusly, right, is to create an apparatus that has us willingly and enthusiastically participate in our own oppression.
Right.
We all participate, right? So when you ask a question about how can we rapidly transform this situation, how can we rapidly change? Oh,
Sorry. Hold on one second. Go.
how can we rapidly change the world, right? Then comes the question, if we're honest in that discussion, is what am I willing to do in my daily life that I know can have massive impact, right? And so that was kind of a long and wordy way to say that we have a responsibility. And the thing that we have at our discretion on any given day that can be impactful, either towards good or towards bad, is our money. We give a lot of money. We give a lot of power to money. I'm talking like, okay, I don't know the general makeup of your audience, but I'm going to get a little bit esoteric for a second because it's still political. There are very specific things in this world that we give energy to, or we give power to. We create the power that these things have. Money is one of those things. Sex is another one of those things, right? Those are the two most powerful forces, actually, that we have to our discretion. And so money, you think about how much time you put into the acquisition of money. You contribute 40 hours of your life every week to the acquisition of money, right? You give to various organizations, institutions, businesses, and what have you, your money, your energy, your spirit really is tied to money. Right. And so one of the things that's coming through a lot right now is, people are calling for boycotts, and that's great. But I think we have to take it a little bit deeper, because what we're talking about is reciprocity, universal reciprocity, the give and take, the balance of give and take throughout humanity. And so it's not a small thing when we learn some distressing fact about our favorite coffee company or our favorite chocolate company. It's not small. When we make a decision after learning information about who the people are we are giving our money to, and we continue to give that money to them, we have shown a sense of solidarity even to their, corrupt behavior. I hope I'm not being too deep, because what I'm saying is, right now, there are lists floating around about corporations who support Trump, right? And people making these, kind of general calls for people to stop supporting these organizations that are giving money to Trump. But what I'm saying to people who are on your show who are really interested in climate change and the impact of what we're doing now on future generations, we have to be a lot more conscious, not just in immediate response to this one guy who we have the ability now to see as the nemesis, the bad guy, right?
Right.
We have to say, I will only give my money and spend my money with organizations, businesses, corporations that I ethically support, that support my ideals and what I say I believe. Because the evidence of you doing what you say you believe is how you're willing to give that money that you've put so much of your life force into acquiring. Mm-hmm. Right?
Absolutely.
I wasn't too deep. Went
No,
too
well,
heady.
you know what?
Too heady, right?
Well, I was just I was talking to my friend yesterday about so you were hipping me to the fact that most of the products that we use in our daily lives include some form of slave labor, right?
Yes.
So there's a website, what's the name of it?
Slaveryfootprint.org.
Okay, so we all know that we have a CO2 footprint. Do you know that you have a slavery footprint? So you can go to this website, slaveryfootprint.org. You can type in all kinds of information about your life, and it will tell you how many slaves are involved in making all the products that you use on a daily basis. And this is crazy. And then you posted a link yesterday of a list of companies. If you use any of the products from these companies, you are using slave labor, right? And it's a long list. It is a huge list. So you'd have to read through this entire list and understand, okay, none of these things are all right to use in your daily life, if that's what you're worried about. But we all use computers, we all use phones. All of the computers and phones that we use also include a certain amount of slave labor, or slave labor, or even what's a notch above slave labor, like indentured servitude.
Yeah. I just want to
Foxconn, indeed, yeah.
I just want to interject that I'm not trying to make people feel bad or guilty. What I am saying is that, okay, so when he's talking about slaveryfootprint.org, it happened across my life totally by accident. And it was through this company that claims to be the only chocolate company on earth that is 100% slavery free, right?
Right.
And so they had all these little statistics about the origin of their chocolate and their relationships and what have you.
Right.
And so it just caused me to go into this kind of rabbit hole of research, and I find slaveryfootprint.org. Now, I'm a working class woman. I don't go on many shopping sprees. I think it's been like 5 years since I've been on a shopping spree. I'm like, I think I'm pretty good.
Right.
I eat pretty decent. I'm straight. So my challenge to your listeners would be to first go and take this survey, because this survey explains in ways that we don't even think of, and that's what I mean when I started by saying that this system has really brilliantly corralled us into participating in our own oppression, and through our consumptive habits. That doesn't mean we have to go back to the Stone Age. That's not what I'm saying. Doesn't mean that we have to be thrust backwards, into, non-development, right? What it can mean is that if we're more conscious and more aware, thoughtful of how we give and receive, that it might be the key, at least partially, to a great evolutionary leap forward, in my estimation. But
Right.
we have to know better in order to do better. So you go on this website, you fill out it takes about 10 minutes to fill out the survey. It leaves no stone unturned. How many pairs of jeans do you own? How many pairs of leather shoes do you own? Do you eat pineapple in the wintertime? Right? So these things that we don't really think about.
Right.
And how there is always, but that's the nature of capitalism, is to exploit someone else for massive profits, right? Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. So anyway.
It's very difficult to escape. I mean, if you live, obviously, I'm preaching to the choir, but we all know that it's very difficult to escape industrial civilization. It's almost impossible to escape the web of consumption that we all live in. But again, to reiterate the things that I've been trying to talk about over the last few months, that we have realized that we have a lot of, the stay-at-home orders, the whole pandemic response, everybody kind of being told to stay home and don't do all the things that we normally do, has actually indicated that we have a lot of power over the economy and over the environment, right? So those things are very clearly spelled out, and it's
God.
what's really funny. So I've been reading a lot of articles, talking about climate change, and they keep trying to say, saying that emissions went down, or saying that the pandemic was good for the environment. You can't say that, right? That's no, we can't have that. And I don't know why this narrative is, obviously it is a narrative, and it is propaganda. But they're really trying to, tell people no, do not make the link between our lack of consumption and the drop in emissions and the health of the environment. You can't do that. But I'm saying that is a powerful thing that has been shown to us. It is a gift of the pandemic. It is a gift of coronavirus. We have been shown individual action is absolutely necessary.
Yes.
It's absolutely necessary. So
it has shown us that we actually have power.
Right.
We actually have the ability to rapidly transform not only our lives and our relationships to other human beings, but in response to that, to change the damn world, the physical world, the environment. We were on lockdown for 2 weeks when the articles started rolling in about the clearing of emissions and people being able to see the mountains the first time in 50 years.
There was a Twitter site that kept taking pictures of the mountains over LA, and they're like, "Did you know there were mountains behind LA?"
Yeah.
You can see them now.
Yes. And so it's I get it. People are kind of, emotional because their sense of normal had been rapidly transformed.
Right.
But the thing, even with the people that tune into my, my live feeds, that I was always trying to keep on the forefront was to see this as empowering, and to see this as an opportunity, one, to self-check, that we never have the time to think. We never have the time to be still or be quiet, right? To think about what's going to come at the other end of this new norm that is being created. The world will never be the same, and we should be happy about that. But what is the norm that we are creating on the other side of this? Those of us who know better, or those of us who give a damn about the way the world looks and our relationship to it, are we creating the new norm, or are we putting ourselves in a position to let someone else, again, create the norm?
Right. And so, the media, and obviously, so I just read an article yesterday about, the head of the IEA, which is the International Energy Agency, was saying, well, we have 6 months to, shoot a trajectory out of this coronavirus pandemic into a green future or whatever. I'm like, yeah, that's not going to happen on a governmental level. It's not going to happen on a policy level. It is not going to happen on a media level, because they're not going to allow, because you're basically saying something that they've already said, we're not going to allow this, this idea to take root into people's minds. Oh, shoot, you mean we could just stay home and change the entire economy, or we could just stay home and change the climate, or this is a path forward.
Yes.
So that actually has to be done by people outside of the system, right? So by people like you and me, like people on YouTube, people on the internet, people on social media. That narrative has to be countered. So I think that the way to do that is to create this idea look what we've done. Look what we can do. Look at the power that we have.
Yes.
It's just that we have to actually take that power for ourselves, and not have it be oh, they told us to stay at home, and they're locking us down, and this is martial law, and the overstep of civil rights and all that. Yes, all of that is true. Yeah. However, if we did it on our own accord, as a unified, organized
Yes.
thrust at changing the system. And I think that, people should start looking at, stay-at-home strikes or,
Yes.
opt-out strikes,
Oh, it's brilliant.
which is what boycotts basically are. I
Yeah.
mean, all boycotts are that on some level, but the only way you're really going to be able to affect that kind of change is to just bear witness to, like, look, this is what we've done. We lowered emissions by 17% in 2 months. That is amazing. That's insane. That is the
It was thought to not be able to happen.
Right,
That we were on a downward spiral that we couldn't come out of.
right. But every time I read the Arctic news, every time I read any kind of environmental, any kind of, like, anybody who's in the doomer, slash, rapid climate change, environmental catastrophe aware world, anybody, they all say, like, oh, we need to do something right away. We need some rapid action. We need a military style response. We need a World War II style response. We need, this insane response to climate change, right? We need to, like, reconfigure our entire system. Well, we just did that, right? We just did that as a side effect of this pandemic. So
Before you get too far,
Right.
because I 1,000% agree, and
Right.
I was just talking to this woman who's a producer for this. They're like creating new shows or whatever, and she was telling me that something that's happening. She's from New York,
right,
so something that is happening that's unexpected
Yes.
is all of these people who work on like Wall Street or people who work, in high-end industry, business, white collar businesses and what have you. What this pandemic has also done is opened up a Pandora's box that will not be closed.
right,
Because what is happening is people are refusing to go back to work. They're like, well,
right,
I don't have to do this at an office. I don't have to fight traffic for
Right.
an hour and a half to get to work. Like,
Right.
you guys can pay me and I can still be just as productive
yeah,
from home.
Yeah.
Even if they open shit back up, I'm not going back to work. Sorry. Y'all are just going to have to find a way to continue to pay me.
right,
And then I was privy to a conversation. I have a friend that works with the LA County School Board here. And parents are saying the same thing. Now, in the beginning, and I'm not saying this is across the board, but in the beginning, all the parents were like, oh my God, how am I going to homeschool my kids? Like, I can't believe, whatever,
Right.
whatever. And, and you were even seeing like little funny videos about, please, just take our kids back. You know what I mean?
right,
Well, in 2 months, that narrative has changed. People have gotten into the swing of it. They get to know their people that are living in their house for a change because
Right.
they're not gone all day.
right,
And so on this, I'm privy to this conversation that's happening between members of the school board and parents voicing their concerns. And they're like, we're not sending our kids back to school in August.
right.
So y'all
I've heard that too.
Yeah,
Yep.
y'all have to work out how y'all are going to accommodate us. Y'all have put us in this situation. Now you're going to have to work out how to accommodate our needs while we work through this new norm for our families.
Right.
You haven't assured us that
Right.
COVID is not going to be
Right.
something that we should be concerned about come August. I'm not putting my child in a hostile environment where they have to wear masks and be 6 feet apart and then they get targeted or whatever.
Right.
So we're just going to keep our babies at
So
home.
so maybe that's a way for people to organize and kind of turn it around, turn the whole message around. Is like, well, we're afraid of coronavirus. We're scared of coronavirus. We're never going back to work. We're never going back to school. We're never supporting this shit. We're never getting on an airplane again. We're never, or whatever it might be,
right? Yeah.
So, it could be a way. I mean, it's an easy kind of opt out, I think, for a lot of people, and it's totally legitimate. And while everybody is like, yeah, let's go back to the restaurants and the clubs and the bars and all that stuff, right? There's a lot of people that are legitimately concerned about, there is also a spike in coronavirus like over the last couple of days.
Mm-hmm.
So, over the last few days and the last week, there's been a spike in the coronavirus. I think in California, there was like 2,000 or 3,000 cases in one day. Just, here we go. 21 hours ago, California sees highest number of coronavirus cases since pandemic began. So, woo, like, yeah. And Florida just had the highest 1 day jump.
Well,
So
the conspiracy theorist in me
I know where you are on this, but for
yeah,
sure.
I would be leery. First of all, I'm a medical, I'm in the medical industry, so I tread lightly between my political self and my Western medical self,
Yeah.
right? But I wonder how the response to these nationwide demonstrations, how much the nationwide demonstrations are playing into the narrative around around corona cases and increases in corona cases.
Right.
Whether these are
And ensuring that people maybe accept another lockdown or,
yeah,
right.
a way to get people off the street
Right.
legitimately, indignant about what they're experiencing in terms of race politics and
Right.
race relations in this country. I get it. Let's say that there's another 250,000 new cases, and maybe we'll scare people enough to keep their asses at home.
Right. Right.
So that's just me playing devil's advocate. I'm just
Sure.
saying.
Yeah. No. And I mean, you've been saying that for a couple months.
Yeah.
That was the way that it was going to go. I think there's like a fine line. I think people are leery of government overreach or government overstep, on stepping on people's civil liberties, and
Right.
they've already. Oh shoot! This has already been done or happening. Hold on one second. Here, just something that I saw.
Yeah, I saw this too.
So this is from June 5th. New York Supreme Court judge rules protesters can be detained indefinitely. So this was something that was put in place kind of just after coronavirus, right? There's, this is already happening under Obama, right? Actually, Obama
Right.
okayed the suspension
The writs of habeas corpus, yeah.
corpus. But now they're actually just implementing that, against protesters, and they were talking about implementing that against people who were, defying coronavirus lockdown. Regulate. This is all happening in the name of coronavirus.
Yeah, there's so many implications. I just read an article the other day. This is kind of terrifying that since the lockdown began in March, the homelessness rate in LA County has
Ooh.
jumped 13%.
I was just
that is a
talking about
crime against humanity.
Right.
It is, and they're saying it's only going to get worse.
Right.
And how we're not using this momentum, and that's one of the concerns, just a side note, to this whole outcry around the murder of George Floyd, is how, again, narrative is created from outside. So
Right.
this thing has been seen as a isolated incident in which people are hitting the street and responding, but
Right.
it is not an isolated incident. This is the culmination of ongoing state-sanctioned state violence.
Right.
Right? And state violence manifests itself in a variety of ways, including, hostile, agents of the state, the military and the police or what have you. But it also manifests itself as genocidal gentrification policies.
Right.
It also manifests itself in, the preschool to prison pipeline.
Right.
So if we get sidetracked on a narrative that places an incidence of state violence to this one particular issue that was the consequence of one bad apple amidst the good,
Right.
then we will forever miss the boat. One, on how we can use the momentum created by the demonstrations to address state violence, to address brutal state policy,
Right.
right?
Right.
And, we won't win anything in the end. We'll be right back to square one because this was just about George Floyd and this one bad cop or these four
Right.
bad cops, and not a tendency that we should expect when dealing with the state.
Right. Well, and interestingly enough, so the protests around George Floyd, have actually also shown us another, like, have given us another gift of like, hey, look, this is what happens. Like, look how much you can accomplish. Like, look how much the state kind of cowers in the face of people really getting out in the streets.
Yes.
And saying, no, we're done. We're
Yeah.
done with this. And unfortunately, like there's such an overarching, there is, an overarching fascism that is predominant in our country, right? And so you can go out in the streets and you can protest police brutality against black people, and that is a singular issue, and you can go and raise awareness around that and actually, force some change and force some action or reaction to that. Mm-hmm. But there are so many, there are so many overarching issues like climate change,
Yes,
and
yes.
and the the corporate takeover of our entire government, right? Because we don't have free and fair elections, because our elections are rigged, because
Yes.
90% of the time the person with the most money wins the election. So whatever corporation or super PAC or whatever, if you throw enough money behind a certain person, generally that guarantees that you can derail whoever your opponent is. So
Right.
that's a corporate capture of our election,
Right.
electoral system. So that's a huge thing to be mad about. Are people going to get out? People could get out in the streets around that.
And what I'm saying is to use the momentum to highlight the various ways. Okay, so yes, George Floyd was the igniter
Right.
for this massive momentum.
Right.
But if we accept a narrative, I'm telling you, that is handed down from someone else, it's just about this one incident, which
Right.
is, we can look at the last 20 years of these incidences. Right? Trayvon Martin, hundreds of thousands of people take to the streets for weeks on end. Mm-hmm. What did it win for everyone at the end? What
Right.
did it even win for his family? Did his family even receive justice?
Right.
You see?
Right.
So you create this momentum, and because the narrative stays narrow,
Right.
it's just about this one incident and this one bad thing,
Right.
and not it being indicative of an entire rotting of the system. Now you can't come together to say, this is what we want to win. We want to win these 5 things
Right.
out of this campaign.
Right.
We want to win, reparations for the family.
Right.
We want this guy to go to prison.
Right.
And we want X, Y, and Z. Systemic social evidence that what our movement as the people coming together in the streets can force the state or force
Right.
the government to yield.
Yep.
But without being even able to articulate a demand, we always end up losing
Sure.
after galvanizing the energy and enthusiasm and the righteous indignation
Sure.
of millions of people at this point.
Right.
And I'm telling you, it's not going to be any different with this if we do not functionally change the narrative and highlight these very things that you're talking about
Right.
within the context of this motion. And it's a serious conversation.
Right.
Because since George Floyd has died, there have been multiple police killings, many really suspect and horrible. I mean, I don't know if you know, but the young man that was found hanged in front of
Right.
the courthouse in Palmdale 2 nights ago, his brother was killed by the sheriff's department.
Yep, I saw that. Oh,
His brother.
Yeah.
You see?
Right.
And so, this thing is butt naked.
Mm-hmm.
But the thing that it brings to me is that we do have the potential to rapidly leap forward if
Right.
we ourselves, and I'm talking about people on the ground, people who are concerned about these issues, are participating in a more organic way in creating the narrative of
Right.
what it is we want to see on the other side of this corona thing.
Right.
I don't know if I was clear about that, but whatever.
No, but I think that's the most important. So having these conversations are, of utmost importance, because it is all about the narrative, right?
Yes.
So,
oh my God.
and it is all about the message or the demands and the articulation of those demands, right? So if it's just a blah, it all sucks, right? Like,
Yeah.
you're not,
Kevin.
you're not going to get anything done with like, oh, it's all fixed. Nah, that's right. Whatever. I'm done here. I've made my great philosophical contribution to society is like, here we go. We're all fucked. Whatever. I mean, like, that's just not going to change anything. And it's all about the articulation of it. which always goes back to, I love the quote from Martin Luther King, when he's trying to get he's like, I'm trying to get the language right. Like that fucking echoes in my mind all the time. Like if you get the language right, if you articulate
what you want,
what you want and what your demands are,
yeah. Let me tell
then
you.
you end up pissing off the power structure.
I've been to several demonstrations since this thing jumped off, right? And I went to one that was organized by a youth league.
Right.
The whole thing was organized by young people, led by and when I tell you, it was the most dynamic demonstration I've been to.
Yeah.
These young people, man, like there was this kid who was brought to the front, this young person that was brought to the front to articulate the list of demands that this organization had, coming out of this movement. Let me just tell you, I've told you what some of my complaints were with the other demonstrations, like no sense of security, no sense of like guiding the people in a certain direction. It was just kind of like a free for all. One that I went to was like Mardi Gras. It was just like a big old party or whatever. These young people had paralegals organized as conscientious observers, identifiable conscientious observers, old school organizing. They had on green hats. They didn't participate in the demonstration in any way. They were flanked on all sides, just watching and videoing, right? That was their only job. They had identifiable peacekeepers, people in shirts that were their security, and they called them peacekeepers, that was securing the entire demonstration. 30 guys,
right,
making sure nothing went down. The only people that were to talk to the police were the peace. It was so organized. And then when this 14-year-old girl got on the stage to articulate the demands coming from these young people, it was like identifiable. It was crystal clear. It was like, they were talking about, economic concessions made to young people, the decriminalization of the public school system, withdrawing the police presence out of the public school system.
Yeah,
we want a withdrawal of all police. We want youth centers, after school youth centers and programs funded by the city of LA, right? We want free bus passes for anybody that's school age, right? Free transportation for anybody that is...
That's
but they were so clearly and kept reiterating the same thing over and over throughout the entire demonstration.
Right.
And to me, it's like when I hear some of the demands coming from larger organizations or larger protests, they're ambiguous, right? They're kind of like soundbitey, right? And that was the thing that was the striking difference between this youth-led. They had very clear, concise, identifiable, and achievable demands.
Right.
And we have to learn by watching children.
Yeah, absolutely.
In a lot of ways, I think.
Absolutely. Well, and it's their future that we're playing with, or creating, whichever way you want to call it. I think that, we were talking about, a little bit earlier, I was talking about people, wokeness, and people understanding, like Shahid Buttar, right? I was playing you some of those clips of Shahid Buttar, and people are waking up to the reality of what the system is that we live in, and how corrupt it is, and how wrong it is, and how dangerous it is, and how destructive it is, and the need for kind of a massive structural change, right? I think everybody's waking up to that, whether you're concerned about climate change, or whether you're concerned about racial inequities, or whether you're concerned about whatever it might be. All roads kind of lead to this, the pyramid with the eye. No, but you know what I'm saying.
Yeah, I know
like,
exactly.
This like power structure that kind of like dictates how the world works, and that doesn't have to be true anymore, right? We can dictate how the world works, but you have to actually be able to, you have to, be brave enough or angry enough or crazy enough to like take on that power structure and organize.
Well, one of the things that I would like to go back to is that everybody has power. And that's the thing that we have not learned. Everyone has power. Everyone.
Right.
Right? Even the, quote, poorest of us create wealth. Right? We go to jobs. We create wealth. We all have power. Not only do we have the power to create, we have the power to empower. So
Right.
when we spend our money irresponsibly,
Yep.
we empower the same forces that we say we are opposed to. So when
Right.
I make a challenge for people to identify what their spending is supporting, it's not a small thing. You don't have to be on you don't have to be on the front lines of a demonstration
Right.
to to use your power or for your power to have an impact.
Right.
And that's the thing that people miss. You know, before this thing happened, I said I was never demonstrating again. I was never participating in a protest again.
Yeah.
20 years of doing it, and the outcome is always the same because it's, to me, there's an exhaustion of energy when there are no clear, definable demands,
Right.
attainable demands that are made as a consequence of this groundswell of energy. However, if you have all of those same demonstrators, 250,000 people saying from each demonstration, we're going to leave this demonstration, we're going to call our senator and we're going to call our councilman, but what we're also going to do is identify 10 corporations that do not support or actually contribute to the thing that we're in opposition to, and
Right.
we're withdrawing every penny from these corporations.
Yeah.
250,000 people saying, look, we no longer support this institution, and I will never again spend another dime to these institutions that uphold police terror in black, brown, and red communities.
Right.
Or we withdraw support from, whatever.
Right.
Identifying ways to punch the state in the pocket.
Right.
Money talks. And that's what, all these little pacifications that are disgusting and really, really play at people's intelligence. What's this dude's name? The guy, the CEO of Chick-fil-A, talking about, what we need to do is we just need to find 15,000 people to, shoe shine black people's shoes as a show of shame or whatever.
Is that what he said?
Oh my
Is that what he
God.
said?
I was like, is this comedy? Is this real? Did this actually happen? Yes, he did. As some play on scriptural reference of Jesus Christ washing the feet of the prostitute, right? So what we need to do to show our shame is and he comes on a television show with a boot brush
Wow.
saying
Okay.
what I need white folks to do is clean black folks' shoes. You understand?
Wow.
Disgraceful.
Wow.
Right? Just offensive in every possible way. So Chick-fil-A, I'm gonna need y'all to withdraw.
Well, Chick-fil-A should have been.
Of course. But I'm just saying
Done
as a
years
statement.
ago.
Yeah, absolutely. But I'm just saying, these people making these kind of deflectionary.
Right,
they're
right. Yeah, yeah.
deflecting from the issue. So,
And
for
it's
example,
all pacification. It's all,
exactly.
It's all,
That's what I mean.
pandering or whatever.
Yeah, I went to pay my phone bill the other day because I pay my phone bill on my phone, and I have T-Mobile. And T-Mobile, so I open up the app, and there's a big old black bar across the top that says, we support Black Lives or Black Lives Matter or something to that effect.
Yeah.
I was like, look, all of these people all of a sudden make Black
Right.
Lives Matter is what,
Right.
10 years old?
Yeah.
All of a sudden, people are getting punched in the pockets and being called on to make statements of solidarity
Yep.
because money talks.
Oh, yeah.
So whether it's your favorite chocolate company that 89% of the chocolate that is produced for their company is produced by child slave labor at that,
Right.
withdraw your money.
Right.
Right? Or if it's, your favorite water bottle company that is, killing activists that are trying to protect their water sources in Peru and Brazil, withdraw your damn money.
Don't buy bottled water, by the way. But
Period.
just don't.
Exactly.
Just don't.
But it really is to me it's empowering.
Right.
To me it really allows us to seize ownership of the impact. We can't concede to the narrative. Well, what can one person do?
Right.
Everything.
Well, and it also goes back to, again, in the realm of climate change, people saying that individual action, doesn't mean anything, and that's absolutely wrong.
Yes.
And here's the thing. The action of everybody staying home and knocking down emissions by 17%, that was
Individual action.
indication that individual action is strong. And to go further than that, if people did that willingly, voluntarily, as an organized boycott of industries in order to lower emissions, two, it would knock the shit out of those industries. It would basically force those industries to either go under or revolutionize the way in which they did business in a way that, if it's possible to do business for most of these industries, in balance or in harmony with the planet. I mean, that's like a whole other discussion. Anyways, hold on. Had Vollmer said, somebody said Iyapo for VP. you want to be Biden's VP?
I will, I'll graciously decline. But thank you.
You're doing Amy Klobuchar. Did you see that?
No.
She was on CNN and she was like, "I've taken myself out of the running for VP." And everybody was like, "You weren't going to be VP anyways. What are you talking about?" But she was like, they think it was a dig at Elizabeth Warren because she's like, I take myself out of the running for VP, and I think we need a woman of color to be VP. And the only other, I guess, white woman is Elizabeth Warren, right?
So everybody, like, don't even come to me. Right. Before you even
but
ask,
that was so funny because she was just like,
let me just tell you, I'm not with it.
Okay,
That's too funny.
Look, my battery's about to run out, and we're about to run out of time, guys. Thank you for.
This was fun.
Yeah, thanks for joining in and hanging out with us today. Just changing things up. Just it's always good to hear from Iyapo, Moyende, and Ngina. We're gonna have her back on again sometime soon. Thanks for coming, Iyapo. I appreciate you. All right, guys, I'm gonna be back tomorrow at 10 a.m. Pacific Daylight Time. Thank you once again for joining in. Thank you for your eyes, your ears, and your conscience. And until next time, peace.